Welcome to Bible Health Secrets. I'm your host, Jonathan Otto, and we're looking at autoimmune disease. Autoimmune disease is affecting the lives of millions of people all around the world. In America alone, it's said to impact the lives of 72 million people. This is talking about multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, and many other debilitating diseases that cause suffering for so many people. We're going to look at biblical approaches to these diseases and also look at Lyme disease and what's the best approach to use in combating this disease. What you'll find is that the solutions that we're discussing here do differ in many ways from conventional medicine, and you'll find that the answers that are found in the Bible are approaches that have lasting results. Before I continue, I just want to say a huge thank you to those of you that decided to own this series. By owning this series, you're supporting our mission and continuing our work in getting this mission, this ministry out to the world, but you're also able to provide yourself with a resource that can help you and your family ongoingly as you can take that next step and delve through the entire gold package and find all the unique insights that it contains, action steps, so you can look after your health and apply these biblical principles on a daily basis. I'm really looking forward to what we're about to learn in this episode. As we're coming to a close of this entire series, I just want to give you that reminder to make sure you check out what we have to offer right now before we close that down, so you can see whether that's something that you'd like to take with you to implement in your life. Let's dive into this final episode and see what the Bible says about these particular diseases and how we can approach them. Today, there are over 80 autoimmune diseases that doctors know of. Having an autoimmune disease can be debilitating and devastating. You can have a healthy immune system with these biblical principles to autoimmune disease. We're about to hear from the man who founded the Hope for Cancer Clinic, Dr. Tony Jimenez, and a mother and daughter who have been personally affected.
You know, with God all things are possible, and that will give everyone a better prognosis, whether it's cancer or any chronic disease, any autoimmune disease. They can be reversible. And they are reversible.
My daughter, when she was 9 years old, was diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder called juvenile dermatomyositis. Skin rashes on her face, on her legs. She had arthritis in her hands and arthritis in her knees, and we were able to find a holistic doctor to help us and get us on this road to recovery.
My name is Celia Cornelius, and when I was 9 years old, I got really sick, but then I kept having faith in God and everything, and I was healed.
As we can see from Celia, having faith is such an essential and beneficial part to healing. Scientific researcher George Engel found religion provides social support, hope, and enables a person to cope more effectively, and it can impact a person's neuroendocrine and immune system, thus your physical health mechanisms. The world tells us that there's no hope, while God says there is hope. So what are some of the ways we can maintain optimal health? One particular link to autoimmune disease are the amount of toxins that our bodies are exposed to. By understanding the impact these toxins have, we can protect ourselves more effectively and essentially work towards the goal of achieving optimal health.
There's really three keys with getting well, and this goes for anybody with health issues. The three big things that I say are parasites, heavy metal detoxification, so that'll come from heavy metal toxicity like cadmium, arsenic, mercury, lead. And then the third one is avoiding mold. And not everybody is a factor or affected with mold itself, but if you are, you have to really remove yourself from that.
So when you look at one of the root causes of autoimmune disease, which is inflammation, essentially anything that causes an inflammatory response in the body can trigger autoimmune disease. And this list is yay long. Top of the list, toxic thoughts, toxic foods, toxic pharmaceuticals. Virtually every pharmaceutical you're going to take is going to have an inflammatory response on the body. It is absolutely mind-boggling to realize that the products that we put on our skin and our hair, that we brush our teeth with, all this stuff is laden with chemicals, and to whatever level, whether minor or extreme, it will cause an inflammatory response.
So food is a trigger. One of the other triggers is chemicals. You mentioned glyphosate earlier when we were talking. This is one that I personally believe is responsible for a big mass exodus towards autoimmune diagnoses in this country, is the way that grain is being harvested, where farmers are using high quantities of glyphosate pre and post harvest. So people are being subjected to mass quantities of this as a poison. And it can trigger autoimmune disease.
And I say this not to make people afraid, because at the end of the day, we're going to walk around in a bubble and we're just going to be afraid. We're going to have gas masks on. That's not the point. You know, God's designed our body with the unbelievable ability to heal itself under the right conditions. However, He's also given our body the unbelievable ability to adapt to its environment. And quite frankly, we all should be dead. I mean, just go out to LA and take a deep breath. I mean, that smog should kill you because of all the toxins in it. But our body has evolved. Our body can rapidly adapt to its environment.
So again, you know, chemical exposure, in this case, leading to nutritional deficiency, which then triggers autoimmune disease. And there are a lot of other chemicals too. It's not just, you know, we use glyphosate as an example, but heavy metals like mercury and lead and cadmium and arsenic and aluminum, these are all known to potentiate and trigger autoimmune processes.
So my focus is to really help people minimize the toxins, and a couple of the big ones that are so widespread are antibacterial products. Those that have triclosan, triclocarbons, and other chemicals that are registered pesticides, to steer away from pesticide-ridden, genetically modified foods, especially grains that are conventionally harvested through a process called desiccation, which they essentially flood the field right before harvest with Roundup. And we don't realize what we're doing at this point. We don't even realize the long-term effects of this constant exposure to toxins.
So by minimizing our exposure to toxins, we can boost health. Another important aspect in boosting our health status is realizing that we may be triggering these symptoms we're experiencing. There are many things we ingest that we're exposed to in the environment that can trigger symptoms.
The first trigger that's been extremely well studied is gluten. So, you know, one of the best things a person with an autoimmune arthritis can do is recognize that gluten sensitivity is a possible potential reason why they've developed that condition, and get appropriately tested to see whether or not they have the gluten sensitive gene pattern. It's called an HLA-DQ gene. Then there's also another set of genes called HLA-B27 genes, which increase the risk for the development of autoimmune arthritis. So having those types of tests done can be very, very helpful in having information to teach or help a patient change their diet to accommodate their genetics. But other foods can be triggers. I've seen autoimmune arthritis be triggered by blueberries. You know, we all think blueberries are healthy. For some people, you know, one man's food is another man's poison. So doing the appropriate type of immune testing to help understand what a person might be reacting to becomes an extremely important part of the process.
Well, in my hands I had arthritis, and I could feel like at school I stopped doing the monkey bars because my hands hurt. I could only close my hands like this much, but now I can close them all the way. My skin rashes are on my eyelids and my cheeks, and a little on my neck and on my leg.
And you had arthritis in your knees that was diagnosed that you didn't know about, and your hips. At one point, when we didn't realize what was going on with her, she was sick. We were living overseas, and she had this terrible stomach pain and was so weak after being sick that she couldn't even jump up one flight of stairs, like one little step. But now we laugh because she could jump like 3. So she had a lot of muscle weakness too, associated with her autoimmune disorder that she eventually got diagnosed with.
Then for you to see what was going on with your daughter, how did you take that as a mother?
Oh, it was awful. It was like your absolute worst nightmare. It's for your kid to get sick like that and not know how to help her. And we didn't even know some of the things that were going on with her arthritis until we finally saw a rheumatologist that diagnosed it. But just the despair of what the doctors, the mainstream medical doctors were giving us as her treatment options that weren't very good, that was just really scary. I can't imagine much worse other than like a terminal diagnosis or something, but that's what it felt like for her at the time. It was a lifelong medicine, chemotherapy drug, IV steroid injections, another strong medication they said for her to be on for at least a year, with a 50% chance she could come off those medications, but a 50% chance that she'd have to stay on the rest of her life. And that was the prognosis given to us. That was the only treatment method that would help her. So we went to a second opinion. They told us the same thing. I had done some research at the time and asked more questions about what about a parasite or what about diet, and they pretty much just laughed at me. And my last thing I said to the last doctor we saw before we saw Dr. Osborne was, well, will you still treat us if in 6 months we give other things a try and 6 months later come back to you and you know, go along with what you're saying, but we want to give some other options a try. And his face just totally went grave, and he was like, you can't do that. You can't wait 6 months to do anything, and this is the only thing that will help her. And here she is. No skin rashes, 10 pounds heavier, arthritis completely gone, and she's healed.
Cecilia was, one of my patients. Little girl, she was diagnosed with a disease called juvenile dermatomyositis, which is basically, it's a skin and a muscle inflammation. So it manifests with rashes, it manifests with a lot of pain. And this little girl was a gymnast, and she couldn't get on the bar. It hurt too bad. So, one of the things we did with her is, of course, autoimmune disease, you've got to look for, 4 triggers, the 4 big common denominator triggers. So for her, she was gluten sensitive, and it was very obvious, but we tested her genetically to confirm it. She was also allergic to things like tapioca and squash and mango, like foods, real foods, whole foods, right? So, go figure, you don't change those things, the problems don't go away. So you've got to get the diet cleaned up even more than just going gluten-free, going beyond that, right? And then she had several deficiencies, several nutritional deficiencies that we had to get corrected as well. And so within about 4 months, it didn't take very long. I mean, we went from, first meeting her to getting her diet identified where she needed to be, to her following that. And then just within about 4 months, she's able to get back up on the bar. She's able to do gymnastics again. The skin rash is going away, and it's almost gone at 4 months. At 5 months, the skin rash is gone.
How does it make you feel?
Amazing, amazing. I mean, it was the hardest journey ever, but God brought us through it and led us on certain paths, and one of those was Dr. Osborne, and it's amazing to look back and know that she's completely healed through all her hard work, and it's a lot of cooking and shopping involved, but she's done it. I mean, she's had to change her diet, and she's had to take supplements and learn how to do all that. And it was a slow process, but looking back now, my husband and I, just like, wow, because it's been a little over a year since we saw Dr. Osborne, and she's amazing.
Anne's one of my favorite stories, because her diagnosis is near and dear to my heart. I mean, I told you my story, shared my story with you earlier about being in the VA hospital. And my first stint in the rheumatology department, and how that really was a life-shifting moment for me. Well, that was because of diseases like rheumatoid arthritis. One of my first patients in practice was a little girl named Ginger, and she had a terminal juvenile rheumatoid arthritis diagnosis. And so it was those 2 events that probably altered the course of my career more than any other 2 events as a functional medicine doctor. Well, when Anne came to see me with a similar diagnosis, this rheumatoid arthritis diagnosis, I mean, she was struggling holding her children. I mean, the pain was so bad, and they had her on a drug called methotrexate, methotrexate's an anti-cancer drug. And its mechanism, one of its mechanisms is it shuts down cellular turnover. So in this case, they're trying to suppress the immune system, so that the immune system's not quite attacking the joints as much. So they're trying to preserve the joints. So the intention is good, but the mechanism isn't so good, because when you take a cancer drug to suppress immune function, the long-term consequence of that is cancer.
Well, I was super skinny, like way skinny, like unhealthily skinny. I didn't realize that I was, because I always eat a lot of food, but I eat a lot of calories, but I was still very, very thin, so I wasn't very strong. It was harder to hold my kids. I would fatigue, I would get tired easily, and a lot of that was attributed to the autoimmune disease, because chronic pain, causes fatigue. It's exhausting. I also like holding them, because you know, you carry babies, you have to find the right position to hold them. You know, they want your hip, or they want to be looking out, or they want to be looking in. And so, and you're not standing straight up all the time, you're always torqued to one side so that you can hold them, and they don't, you know, it's easier for you. And so it was hard to have to always be changing those positions.
But the other long-term consequence of that is something called folate deficiency. Folate is a B vitamin, and you cannot make cartilage. So we want, the body says, I need to make more cartilage, right? I need to make more padding between the joints. It can't do that without folate, right? So she's got this joint disease where she's got cartilage inflammation. They're giving her a drug that suppresses the nutrient that's necessary to form cartilage, right? So they're buying her time, but they're guaranteeing the destruction of everything else, of all the other joints, guaranteeing it. Even by and that what they had her on was a synthetic folic acid, which isn't the same thing as folate. It actually increases the risk of certain types of cancer. So, you know, methotrexate's not a great idea. Now, it did suppress her pain, and it did allow her to have some function. And she was really reticent about getting off of it. You know, we changed her diet. We had to.
When I would have a flare, it was impossible. I couldn't hold them. It was too painful. I couldn't hold them. I couldn't carry them the way that they needed to be carried. I couldn't cut vegetables. I couldn't make dinner. It was hard to lift something with my hand if my wrist was inflamed, or if my fingers were inflamed. Or writing sometimes was difficult, because you know, you have to bend a certain way to do that, and when the inflammation, it's larger, and it just hurts to bend.
And she was really reticent about getting off of it. You know, we changed her diet. We had to take her grain-free. We took her off of allergies. I had to retest her allergy responses several times because it took that long with Anne. She's just one of those patients, you know, with autoimmune disease. It can take 18 months, sometimes as many as 3 years, to really get the immune system to quit overreacting. And so in those cases, we've got to make sure we know how to change the diet periodically to match the immune system so that we're not exciting the immune system. And so for her, that was part of the strategy. We had to really tightly monitor her. But every 6 months, the pain got less. Every 6 months, the joints were less swollen. She was more functional. She was better and more capable, until we got to a point where I had to have a conversation with her, because I knew that the methotrexate was the last reason as to why her pain was not fully going away, because methotrexate also causes leaky gut.
I wasn't able to be very patient either, because I was on edge because it hurt. And so my poor kids suffered some of the wrath of the autoimmune disease, which is very unfortunate, but then again, it's another learning process, and I've been able to choose better, so that's been positive.
So when we look at the progenesis, where does rheumatoid arthritis come from? There's this concept, Jonathan, called molecular mimicry. Okay, molecular mimicry means when the gut is leaking. So think of your gut, it's a quarantine zone. The gut is a tube, and it's supposed to keep bad things out and let good things in. What happens with molecular mimicry is that the gut is sprung holes. There's microscopic pinholes in your gut. So all the garbage from the food, all the waste, is leaking in. And sometimes what happens is proteins from bacteria and proteins from yeast also leak in. And some of these proteins look like human tissue. And in some cases, some of the bacteria, especially certain bacteria like Klebsiella and Pseudomonas, these are species of bacteria that produce proteins that look like our joints. Right? So these proteins, these bacterial proteins, can leak into the bloodstream through that leaky gut, being caused by the methotrexate, right? And the immune system starts to attack them because it looks at them and it says, these are foreign. But over time, what it says is, hey, these look like our joints. Let's attack the joints too because they look the same. That's molecular mimicry. So the molecules that are leaking through the leaky gut mimic the joints, and they perpetuate the autoimmune response. And until you stop that gut from leaking, you know, and whatever's causing it, whether it's a medication that you're on, or whether it's, you know, that you're eating the wrong food, or plastics. Plastics can cause a leaky gut. Eating or drinking out of plastics can cause a leaky gut.
As far as food goes, I started out with just going grain-free and dairy-free, and went forward from there, still having a lot of inflammation. And over the period, so it was like 4 months, and then I cut out beans. And then it was a few more months, and I was just eating fish because fish is supposed to be easier to digest. And still having problems. And so then I stumbled upon autoimmune protocol. So not just paleo, which is what I was doing in the beginning, was paleo, plus the exclusion of the allergies that the doctor had helped me find.
So it doesn't matter what it is that you're doing. You've got to stop that process, to stop the molecular mimicry, to calm down the immune system long enough so that the joints can begin the process of healing and repairing, so you can get that patient back to stable and normal. And that's what we had to do with Anne. But her story is an amazing turnaround from not functional to completely functional, and being able to be a mom and being able to do CrossFit and being able to do the things that she really wanted to do.
I got into the Lyme disease world because of my wife. 1 Peter 4:10 says, each of you should use whatever gift you've received to serve others. And I really believe that your story becomes your specialty. My wife has a long health history, got quote unquote sick when she was 7 years old and just started all kinds of issues. Coma, heart surgeries, sinuses scraped, just list went on. They actually weighed her hospital paper file. This is obviously when they did paper notes back 25 years ago, and it weighed 20 pounds. That's how many health issues she had. But when she had my daughter a little over 5 years ago, when Lila was born, the bottom fell out. And leading up to it, we had a lot of signs and things that should have gave us clues as to this maybe isn't all going right. She was having some heart palpitations, some heart issues during pregnancy, just some bad adrenal issues. And then when she gave birth to my daughter, it was natural, but it was a long labor, 25 hours, and so stressful. And basically from that time forward, she just couldn't recover. She had to stop breastfeeding a couple months in because her body just couldn't even really produce it. And I remember the time when she stopped, Lila stopped fussing. It was literally, I think she was getting all the stress hormones from my wife. And then she became reactive and allergic to everything. Bone broth, water were literally the only two things that she could consume. She went like 17 days fasting. Obviously the Bible references fasting a lot. In this circumstance, it wasn't by choice, it was literally by necessity. She'd have a piece of lettuce and her throat would close off. But from that, fasting, bone broth, water started to calm inflammation down. We realized it was chronic Lyme disease coming back. We also realized it was heavy metal toxicity, mercury and lead that we hadn't addressed before. We started digging in and going into it, and it was a tough journey. There was many nights going to bed where I literally laid there. I remember I could still picture it, laying in bed and looking over at her, just wondering, is she going to be awake in the morning? And if she's not, how am I going to take care of a newborn? The most common symptoms I see, especially with clients I work with, bad sleep, bad energy, which those go hand in hand. If you don't sleep, your energy during the day is just, it's bad. Anxiety is up on the list, a lot of brain symptoms, brain fog, and I would also say pain too. And especially the arthritis, moving around type pain. I've got shoulder pain today, and now next day it's my knee, and now it's my hip, and it just seems to move about. That definitely is pretty classic for Lyme disease type symptoms, but Lyme is tough to diagnose. It literally has over 150 different symptoms, 150. And so you can have such variety of presentations based on that. And Lyme's nothing new.
No, you're not necessarily saying that everyone would be that sensitive, is that correct?
No, I'm saying everyone who is actually sensitive is that sensitive. Meaning that if somebody's gluten sensitive, some people will say there's levels of sensitivity. There aren't levels of sensitivity. It's like pregnancy. You either are or you're not, right? But when it comes to gluten sensitivity, there are acute levels of obvious reactivity. Maybe that's a better way to put it. Meaning that some people eat gluten who are gluten sensitive and they don't feel bad right away. Like it gets inside of them, creates inflammation in their GI tract. It creates what's known as intestinal hyperpermeability or leaky gut, right? And then over time, it slowly erodes at their health. It slowly eats at their muscle tissue or their bone tissue or their liver tissue. But they don't eat gluten and vomit, right? They don't eat gluten and have severe diarrhea and gastric pain. So they don't really recognize the symptom outwardly, right? And some people, that's the way they react. They don't have less of a sensitivity. They have less of an obvious reaction to it. And those people, in my opinion, the diseases are more dangerous because it's harder for them to pinpoint what they're doing wrong. Does that make sense? So if you're gluten, that's why I do testing. I don't ever guess, because I don't want to say, hey, let's try this diet for 6 weeks, 6 months, and see how you do. First of all, it's a hard diet to follow if you've never followed it before. And second of all, it requires a commitment. There's a 12-week learning curve. So if you just guess at that, and that patient goes gluten-free on a guess, goes through all this emotional turmoil because they can't eat pizza at the birthday party, they can't eat the cake, right? And they don't get better, now what? Now you failed them. So I'm a big believer in objectivity and objective testing, because if you have a black and white you can hand a patient, then you're not guessing, and they understand that this is black and white and that you're not guessing, then they can commit. Do you see what I'm saying? Otherwise you get a half commitment. You know, you get a, I'm going to only eat gluten on Fridays, right? And that doesn't work. If you have an autoimmune disease and you're gluten sensitive, one exposure to gluten can create an inflammatory response that lasts for up to 2 months. So you have to take it seriously. So the only way a person's going to take it seriously is if they know they absolutely need to. So we tested her. And so in her case, genetically, she had the gene markers for gluten sensitivity, and we took the grain away from her, the gluten and the grain away from her diet, and she made a recovery. She would not have made a recovery if she had only gone wheat, barley, and rye free. And I see that time and time and time again with patients who are gluten sensitive. As a matter of fact, some researchers have found only 92% of people who are gluten sensitive respond to a wheat, barley, and rye free diet. Rather, only 8% respond. 92% of the people don't respond. They still continue to have persistent inflammation. So that's why we want the black and white. We don't want to guess. We want to be able to know this is the right thing for you to do as a unique person.
It's important that people have an idea of what symptoms can manifest if they have autoimmune disease. Symptoms include headaches, anxiety, brain fog, attention deficit problems, body rashes, acne, rosacea, eczema, psoriasis, dermatitis, allergies, asthma, dry mouth, frequent colds, thyroid issues, fatigue, hyperactivity, weight gain or loss, general feeling of malaise, muscle pain and weakness, digestive tract upset, stomach cramping, diarrhea, and constipation. Being aware of these symptoms, especially if several of them are occurring simultaneously, may help a patient seek the right kind of assistance early on and prevent long-term effects.
But nutritional deficiencies can cause or trigger autoimmune disease or make existing autoimmune disease worse. So it's something that absolutely needs to be evaluated. It's actually glyphosate, before it was a pesticide, was used as a chelating agent to strip metals. So it strips metals from the human body just as well as it strips metals from plants and weeds and kills them. So,
and it's taking the good metals from the body, is that right?
Yeah, especially one of the metals it can rob the body of is selenium. Now, selenium, one of its functions is in thyroid. And look at how many thyroid disease, thyroid prescriptions are written in the United States alone. I mean, it's one of the top medications in the world. But selenium is necessary to convert thyroid hormone. So T4, which is inactive thyroid hormone, to be able to convert it to the active form of thyroid hormone, which is T3, requires an enzyme that is selenium driven. So if you are exposing somebody to a chelating agent that's stripping their body away of selenium, they can actually become hypothyroid. And selenium deficiency can trigger autoimmune thyroid disease. And then we have chemicals, we have foods, then we have what food provides, which is nutrients, right? Vitamins, minerals, amino acids, proteins, right? Going back to what I said earlier about selenium. Selenium deficiency can trigger an autoimmune thyroid condition. Vitamin D deficiency has been very well studied to be causative, meaning vitamin D deficiency can cause, listen to this, if you have rheumatoid arthritis, can cause rheumatoid arthritis. Now, how many of you listening to this program are seeing a rheumatologist and you've never even had your vitamin D levels checked, right? One of the very first things that you should demand, one of the very first things that you should do. And if your doctor won't run the test, get with an independent lab who will run it for you. And there are lots of those out there that'll do it for you without a doctor's order. But it's critical, right? Vitamin D. And then the fourth trigger, infection. And I've mentioned infection with other patients, parasites, bacterial infections, yeast overgrowths or yeast infections, prion infections, mycoplasma infections. There's all different kinds or types of infections. But infections, when I say infection, I'm not talking about, some people are saying, well, I don't have an infection, I don't feel bad, I don't have a cold or a flu. It's not what I'm talking about. Think of Lyme. It's a chronic infection. Think of, if you've ever heard of, there's a bacteria called Helicobacter pylori. It won a Nobel Prize for its discovery. It was discovered that this type of chronic infection causes acid reflux, heartburn, and gastric erosions.
You know, it really dates back actually to biblical times as well. There was an Iceman that they found, they estimate about 5,300 years ago. He was actually murdered and then frozen, and they actually found the Lyme disease bacteria in him. They named him Otzi, but the Borrelia burgdorferi bacteria they actually found in him. And technically for Lyme disease, it's a bacteria. The Borrelia burgdorferi is the bacteria, but there's Borrelia myomotai as well. So there's a couple different, you know, strains that are quote unquote linked, but as far as the Borrelia species, there's over 300 across the globe. There's by itself in America, you know, 100. So there's a lot of different actually strains of this bacteria. And Lyme disease comes in many different forms. Spiral shape, so it's a spirochete, likes to drill, so it doesn't like to float around the bloodstream, which makes it tough to diagnose, or really tough to test as far as lab testing, you know, blood testing. So it likes joints, it likes tissues, you know, just organs as well too. When the Lyme disease bacteria, the spiral shape, gets stressed, it can actually change or morph. It can change into a cyst or a round body form. So instead of essentially from going from that spirochete form, it'll literally engulf and eat itself and turn into a ball or like a, you know, a cyst form. And it's that form itself is 1,000 times more protective against antibiotics when it changes into that form. And it can do it, you know, within a matter of minutes, pretty quickly. It's also got an intracellular form, or what we call like a stealth form, where it'll go inside of our own cells. And this is where the autoimmune component comes in, causes autoimmunity. And then our body starts attacking our own cells, thinking that maybe that's Lyme inside there, or, you know. And then there's also another form called the biofilm as well. So there's a lot of different forms, and you know, Lyme disease itself is evasive. I mean, it replicates as well too, even from a biblical standpoint. You know, it replicates like sin. That people who really attempt, you know, that sin really attempt to get others to do that. And it seems like this bacteria does the same thing in our body, that it, you know, it gets other bacteria, other bugs, pathogens, viruses, fungus to tag along with it as well too. And all disease really has the same father, Satan. You know, it's the same old act. So going after disease, you really have to go after what's not supposed to be in our body and what's attacking our body.
Okay, so Nancy's story is amazing. She came in to see me. She had all kinds of prior diagnoses. So, you know, think autoimmune arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, spondyloarthritis, ankylosing spondylitis, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus. She kind of had a mixed bag. She'd been to different doctors and she'd had a few different types of diagnoses. But in her case, it was affecting her eye. So Reiter syndrome was one of the diagnoses that she had, which is, you know, it's an autoimmune arthritis that affects the eyes, it affects the bladder, it affects the feet and the knees. And so, you know, you get crippled, you can't walk. Doctors want to inject needles of steroids into your eyeball. It's a very, it's not a disease that you want to be stricken with and then be subjected to mainstream care, because needles in the eyeball, steroids, drugs like methotrexate, drugs like immune suppressants, all of these come with, they come with severe side effects, and they don't fix the origin of why the disease is there in the first place. So in the case of autoimmune arthritis, you know, what are we looking at as causation? What is the cause? What is the underlying reason why those diseases start? And there's really, categorically speaking, there are 4 big triggers, right? So when you think of infection, don't think of a cold or a flu. Think of a chronic microorganism that has gotten into your body and grown out of control, and it's creating ongoing inflammation in some location that is destroying your tissue, right? In the case of H. pylori, it destroys the stomach, it destroys the esophagus. In the case of Lyme, it gets in the joints, it can get in the nerve tissue. Think of the virus. Many of you probably heard of herpes, right? You think of chicken pox, it's a type of herpes virus. You think of shingles, it's a type of herpes virus. It colonizes in your nerves. That's why the nerve pain is so excruciating when that infection gets out of control. But it's an infection, and it creates a condition that's not a cold or a flu, right? It creates a chronic pain. It creates a chronic inflammatory process within the body. And sometimes those things have to be investigated. You have to run the right kind of lab testing to look for them. And then whatever is found, you know, an appropriate protocol has to be implemented to help that patient's immune system get back online or to recover. And no immune suppressant is going to fix that. It actually makes it worse. A lot of times I get patients that come to me, you know, as in the case of Nancy, where they've been put on immune suppressants like steroids, like some of the more powerful, what are called DMARDs, disease-modifying anti-rheumatic drugs. They get put on these long-term, and what's happened is now they've suppressed their immune system, but part of their disease was caused by an infection. So that infection has gotten stronger the longer they've been on that medication. So now we're dealing with a much more powerful infection. That's why they're in my office, because they didn't get better with the medicines. But we have to identify that, and then we have to go in and identify what's the best way to bring the immune system back up online, not in a manner that is consistent with the immune system attacking the patient, but in a manner that's consistent with the immune system calming down and doing its job, which is quit attacking the patient and start attacking the bacteria or the virus or whatever it is that's creating or contributing or triggering the disease in the first place.
Well, back in when my son was born in 1997, now I'd had years of issues with my stomach, different, you know, inflammation, you know, joints would hurt, that kind of thing. But it really came to a head after I had my son. And I initially, in a period of 4 months, I had 8 infections in 4 different months. It was like my body was falling apart after I had my baby. And I was like, I don't understand what's going on. Then all of a sudden I had what I thought was conjunctivitis. And that went on for 3 weeks, and it just got steadily worse and worse. While I was experiencing it, I was having stomach problems at the same time. Like, okay, I was having strobing paralysis in my back. And then the latest development was if I sat on the floor, I had a baby and a 17-month-old. If I got down on the floor to play with the 17-month-old, or as my son was growing older, the baby, I couldn't get back up. I'd have to crawl over to the coffee table to try to stand up and everything like that. Well, finally, when the eye situation kept getting worse, they gave me the antibiotics. It didn't improve. 3 weeks later, I go back in to doctor number 3, eye doctor number 3, and they look in my eye, and I could see by the expression on his face, he was like, this is not conjunctivitis. I was like, what do you mean? He goes, I think this is an autoimmune condition. If you don't mind, I want to do a blood work. It's going to fall under a genetic marker, HLA-B27 antigen. And I think this is something called uveitis. Well, the marker came back positive, but in the meantime, the only treatment they could do for me, because the inner part of my eye was pulling apart, literally the iris, everything was pulling apart, the cells of my eye, and it was completely inflamed, was by putting injections of steroids in my eye. And it was a very traumatic thing. If you've ever, most people don't like their eyes messed with to begin with, but literally I would go in and they tried oral steroids. It just didn't work for me. I'd be on, I think it was 80 milligrams of prednisone, and it would not control it. So they'd end up, you know, I'd go in, the minute it happened, I knew this is going on, and it would get extremely bad. And they said, you can end up blind if you don't run in right away. So I called them, they knew it was me. I'd go into the doctor, and the ophthalmologist would, you know, stare in the corner, and then he'd put an injection in my eye. And that was the only way they could control the inflammation. And it happened, I guess, 3 times a year or more. For, you know, I never knew why or when. And I think I only they told me there was a blessing in that usually it didn't occur in both eyes at the same time. They don't know why, but it would usually alternate eyes, or sometimes I'd get a repeat in one eye. But it was extremely difficult to deal with because I never knew when is this going to happen, and it would take a good 3 to 4 months for vision to come back in that eye. So I was pretty much driving, functioning with one eye, and one eye, it's not like you can, it's like having no contact in one eye for 3 or 4 months, and if you wear contacts and you have that experience, that's what it's like. And it was pretty difficult to deal with, for sure. The constant not knowing when it would happen, and at the same time, while that was going on, it was connected to the back problems, and I was on all kinds of steroids and the non-steroidal NSAID medications, and I kept having reactions to them, so they would switch me to the next one, and then the next one. I think I tried 8 different ones, and then I tried 3 different immunosuppressants, and they didn't work. In fact, one of them, a small percent of the population, including myself, got the extreme opposite reaction. Instead of suppressing the immune system, it caused cysts on my retina. So I nearly went blind because of that, because I had like all these cysts on my retina from taking this. It was a drug called Enbrel, and that's how it impacted me. And so there was always this challenge. Like I felt like I was always dealing with the when is this going to happen, and then the pain of not being able to stand up, or if I sat down for a long period of time, I felt like I was 85 years old or whatever. It was so stiff I couldn't get up and things like that. And the only blessing in all of that is it never developed to fusion of the spine, which is the worst case scenario, one of many, but in ankylosing spondylitis, where you actually get fusion of the spine and you're wheelchair bound and that kind of thing. Thankfully for me, it never got to that extreme. I guess when I was having flares and things, I was getting anti-inflammatories and trying to stay active, even though it was tremendously painful, because I hoped to prevent that if I could.
And so then what did you do to get better, and what was the result?
100% my diet. I mean, honestly, I was having all these different problems, and when I went in to see the holistic doctor, Dr. Osborne, he looked at me and he listened to my story, and he just said, I think you are gluten intolerant. And I said, you can just tell them. He said, I'm looking at you and I'm listening to what you're saying, and this is what I think is going on. He said, but we can do the blood work, which of course came back positive. I had 3 of a possible 4 genetic markers, but he immediately gave me the diet to start following. I think it took me 4 days to start feeling better. That's how quickly. I was like, oh my gosh, like amazing. That was the stiffness, the soreness, the immediate joint, the reaction of the joints. But when I truly went gluten-free, and when I mean gluten-free, I mean grain-free, I just stopped having eye flares. It was a miracle to me, because I was like tied to the phone, like, okay, here it comes, it's coming again, and run over to the doctor, have the eye drops ready, which really didn't work, but run over there, get the shot in the eye and everything like that. And it's 100% my diet.
There is hope for people with autoimmune disease. All it takes is simple life adjustments. There are so many components when it comes to immune function. Another important aspect to consider is the role that parasites can play in your body's ability to maintain health. A parasite's role is basically to use you as a resource for sustaining itself at your expense. So essentially, your body has to support this invader, and it takes away from its ability to function at full capacity.
Thinking from a simplistic, wise standpoint, parasites are bigger in size. So if you think, okay, they're bigger, that means that little things can live inside, like viruses and bacteria, such as Lyme, Epstein-Barr. Parasites are also sponges. So they're sponges for heavy metals especially. So if you have heavy metal toxicity in the body, oftentimes the body will keep parasites around because it's helping with the heavy metal burden and absorbing that. That's where, you know, if somebody's had a lab test for heavy metals and it's come up low or even negative, that literally having parasite issues could mean that's why heavy metals are actually not showing, even if there are heavy metals present, because the parasite's really, you know, protecting that.
So, you know, one of my favorite long-time stories is a young woman named Jessica. Jessica came to see me, and she was really struggling. She was actually accused of being an anorexic. Her doctors were accusing her of, you know, forcing vomiting and because she couldn't put weight on, and she was wasting away, and I mean, she was dwindling away. And so when they brought her in, like, I was the first doctor that even believed that she wasn't anorexic. I loved her story because that was the backdrop to it, is that she had gone to several experts, several specialists. You know, God led her to me. You know, I believed her, and you know what was interesting about her, she had some parasites. And, you know, parasites steal from you. They rob your nutrition. Like, that was one of the main things we found. And we found several things with her. She had a lot of different food allergies. But she was manifesting all kinds of symptoms. Weight loss, she couldn't put weight on. She was having joint pains. Her hair was falling out. I mean, there were a lot of things going on. I don't think anybody could have really said, hey, let's pinpoint it to this one condition. But she had multiple autoimmune processes going on in her body. So, I mean, if you're struggling with kind of a chronic autoimmune, you know, array, if you will, pay attention, because in this case, she had parasites. That was one of the big factors. She was gluten sensitive, she had parasites, she was malnourished, and the parasites were eating her food. Now, in her case, what's interesting is, you know, we used some natural botanicals to try to knock them out. Didn't work, right? It just didn't work. And this is one of those areas where melding of medicine and natural medicine can work. Like, we ended up sending her to an expert in New York, a doctor in New York, and he, you know, his history is very interesting. He actually worked in third world countries for years studying parasites. So he actually, we sent her up to New York to visit with him, and it actually ended up taking a pharmaceutical agent in this case to actually eradicate the parasite. Once we got the parasite under control, and we got the diet under control, and we got her well nourished, look, she's acting, she's singing, she's capable of doing, you know, great things in the world. All because I believed that she wasn't anorexic. All because I didn't accuse her, right, of being a liar when she was in my office asking for my help, right? And that to me is a travesty. Like, we can joke about it today, but like, she visited how many doctors and was called a liar by how many doctors when it was her intent to go to them to get help? What kind of world are we living in where somebody comes and asks for your help and you say, you're a liar and I don't believe that you really need my help, you know, when you're a doctor?
I mean, my faith is everything, and I think that's absolutely what carried me through my life. My faith is my what I call my hope, but more so what I call my confident expectation for what's to come in the future. And so being able to consistently go off of that and live on that is what absolutely helped me, and I believe even helped me to find my doctor, you know, continuing on that search. If I had given up, then I wouldn't have gotten the answers. But my faith absolutely just drove me to continue to fight. I actually heard that from a lot of people. You know, if God is such a good God and such a loving God, why would He bring this upon me? Or why would He bring this upon you? You know, a lot of people, even to be honest, truthfully honest, thought that my condition was from the devil and they wanted to heal me. You know, they wanted to cast the devil out of me. I believed that it was my story that I was given and I was born with in order to become something and outshine my life for a better reason, if that makes sense. You know, I believed that my story was going to be more important to be able to help others, hopefully, and to be able to help inspire and encourage others. And I always naturally felt that. I really didn't have, that just came from within me. So I think that I just received that grace from God and from my faith, you know, whatever it is you believe in. I think that when you can fully be able to accept and receive and believe in grace, that it can take away all the negativity and all the wanting to point fingers and find a, you know, a reason to try to, I don't know, lose your hope in a way, but it can help you to be able to just give you the confidence and the energy and the strength to be able to just go after that, you know, and help that just drive you and pursue your life.
Yeah, how would you connect with God? Would you pray? Did you read the Bible? And if you did, how did you approach that? And how would that fall in your day? And then, because you mentioned you being a singer, would you sing to yourself, sing to others, sing to God? How is your kind of practices in regards to your faith?
I grew up with a family, in my family, where we continually, you know, went to church and we studied and we learned the Word from the Bible. And so that was my medication. That's what I turned to for my medication, is the Word, and being able to really truly pray and cast all of just my cares and just everything that I was going through onto Him, because I knew that it was out of my control. It literally was the only thing that I said, you know what, this is only on you. And you are either gonna help me through this and you're gonna take care of this, or I'm gonna fall and I'm gonna fail. So either way, I have no other options. I've tried everything. And on the question of singing and being able to use that, I think that, you know, naturally that was always something that I was just talented at. I think it also was such a gift that I realized was given to me, because my life, the most part of my childhood, was spent in the car driving to doctor's offices, and then waiting in the waiting rooms, and then waiting in these rooms that were just white walls that had no color to them, no life, no windows. And in that car, though, my mom would put music on and I would just sing. And music was my outlet. Music was just another part of just what saved me, because I was able to just escape from everything that was going on. The pain, really, and I was just able to just feel free from being able to sing. So that definitely saved me and carried me on throughout all my journey of just trying to find my health.
Amazing. Now, did you ever write songs or anything like that?
I did, actually. I wasn't into that growing up, and that was never anything that I thought that I would pursue, but actually I ended up getting the opportunity to move to LA right out of high school, and I worked with producers and I started writing and producing my own music. And so then I released my single and I shot music videos and I released those, and things were going great because I was actually I had a lot of momentum in my life, and I was touring around. I was going from New York back to Houston and Texas and touring around Los Angeles, and I actually started doing a school tour. I teamed with Michelle Obama's Let's Move initiative, and I started going into schools and coaching kids and talking to them about the importance of health and fitness. But little did I know that, you know, I was still searching, and really, you know, my health was just really about to spiral out of control. But I just truly always had that, you know, hope of being able to help people find their joy and their happiness and their most vibrant, you know, health, because I knew that I was trying to find that as well. And so, yeah, it was always a part of me.
Awesome. Jessica, now, have you ever written a song about your experience with your health?
Yeah, a lot of the songs that I wrote, I feel like came from just that struggle and that defeat and that, you know, also just that drive and that motivation from being able to just strive for better. I did write a song, however, called See the Light, which it was really just more so an actual representation of what my life was, being blind in one eye and not being able to truly be able to see light sometimes from just really dark moments, but always knowing that that light is there. You know, I could go back to that light being at the end of the tunnel.
Can you sing it for us now?
Oh my gosh, that was so long ago. Oh, see, I've been there before, and I know how it feels. When there's darkness all around you, I decided to dream, and it allowed me to heal. So I'm reaching out to tell you, if you look to the light, then you'll see what's inside. Don't give up on yourself, 'cause there's no place to hide. There's a little snippet of it.
That's so beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
She had a parasite at one time that was contributing to her arthritis, and we had to do like a parasite regimen to get rid of that, so some extra pills. So, but right now.
And you were able to confirm that you removed the parasite, or?
Dr. Osborne, his
Yeah.
test, yeah, we did like a stool test to check, and it was definitely there, and he said that one was kind of notorious for joint inflammation and arthritis, and so we did I think it was 6 or 8 week regimen to get rid of that, and then retested, and it was gone, and that's when her arthritis started getting better, was when we were doing that. We already saw results just after a few weeks of being on that, but then we confirmed that was all gone.
Now parasites, as I mentioned, they fit into this, you know, and it's interesting because parasites aren't always mentioned, especially in America. But even the CDC, this was a few years back, May of 2014, they actually had a press release that stated that millions of people are actually affected by parasites in the United States. And they said it doesn't matter race or, you know, ethnicity or financial, like it's millions across the board in America. And oftentimes when we think of parasites, we're thinking of third world countries, which of course you can get it there too, but there's all kinds of parasites in America. I had massive parasite issues and just caused really bad skin issues, huge bags under my eyes, food allergies, especially to milk, dairy. Actually had to put apple juice on my cereal growing up because I was allergic to milk. Big teeth grinder, which I didn't understand why that was happening. It was actually parasites because they become, you know, active in the middle of the night. Some people, you know, they call it like the witching hour, where you wake up and you just body's not feeling good. A lot of times it's parasites actually taking activity in the body and stressing it out, which affects sleep, which then, you know, you affect sleep, then you're affected energy. So I know personally, and there's many kinds of parasites in America, and they're across the globe, but there's a bunch of different roundworms. Ascaris lumbricoides was a big one that I had, type of roundworm. There's pinworms, there's threadworms, Cryptosporidium, Blastocystis hominis is actually a pretty prevalent one as well. Giardia. There's different flukes like pancreatic flukes, which can cause blood sugar issues. There's liver flukes, which just clog up that liver area and can affect so much. And in the word, you know, parasite, when you look at the Greek meaning, it actually says a person who eats at another's table. That's really the meaning of parasite. And these evil things, I really believe, you know, my interpretation is they all stem really from when Adam rebelled. Looking at Genesis 3, you know, that's really when these things were created. And there's many biblical references of worms and maggots and things, but I mean, parasites is definitely a big category.
Sometimes we won't see the results on a test because we need to trust our own instincts and what our body's going through. One difficult issue to address that is difficult to test is for chronic Lyme disease, which is sometimes shunned as a diagnosis by medical professionals. However, for those dealing with this disease, they are longing for a cure. Through seeking for natural solutions that God has provided and finding strength in Him, there is hope for healing.
And then the other thing that we're understanding more and more too is that fungus, candida yeast can live inside, and same thing with mold spores. It's in the same category. So let's say that somebody's in a moldy environment and they remove themselves from the mold. If you have parasites, mold spores can be inside the parasites, and these mold spores can be coming out of the parasite and causing more mold symptoms, even if somebody's not, quote unquote, still in a moldy environment. And when I think back with my wife, Heather, there was at least 4 health crashes that happened that since I knew her. In the first 3 of them, I know there was mold present in all 3 of those first crashes. The 4th one was when my daughter was born, and that's really, when the bottom fell out. But even from a biblical side of things, mold is talked about in the Bible. Leviticus 13:47, Leviticus 14:33 as well too. And really my interpretation when I read that, and you can check it out as well, is if there's mold, clean it. And then if it comes back again, remove it. And then if it gets so bad that it keeps coming back, that's when you relocate. You literally move and don't take your stuff with you. And the reason they say, don't take your stuff with you is that mattresses, couches, things that are like fabric porous, can have mold in them, and you go to a new environment that's quote unquote clean of mold and you could be bringing it in there. So mold is definitely nasty, and it's something that we really want to avoid for sure.
All these environmental factors affect our health and cause autoimmune disease. Sometimes it's medical intervention itself that can lead to terrible damage to the body. At times, it seems that rather than dealing with the health system and its problems as a whole, the medical system is putting out fires, sometimes fires that they have started.
Effective treatment protocols. First of all, I don't agree with the pharmaceutical approach, especially antibiotics for chronic Lyme disease. I mean, the word pharmaceutical comes from the Greek word pharmakia, aka, if you look up pharmakia, it says sorcery. And right in the Bible, Galatians 5:19 talks about, now the deeds of the flesh are evident, and then it lists a bunch of things, but one of these is sorcery or pharmakia. And things like these, of which I forewarn you, just as I forewarned you before, those that practice this will not inherit the kingdom of God. So I'm very, very cautious in the pharmaceutical type world, and pharmakias, even singled out in Revelation 18, I believe, and really talking about as a means, for the ethnos or like the races, this is how they're being deceived, like literally singled out. Pharmakia is how they're deceiving the races. So antibiotics can be detrimental. They destroy gut bacteria. That's commonly known across the board. But also science is now showing that antibiotics actually damage the mitochondria. And the mitochondria are the energy cell factories of our body. Every single cell in our body has mitochondria, these little energy cell factories in them, except for like the red blood cells. But there's literally tens of billions of these things in our body. It's like there's a tremendous amount. And the idea is if you're having fatigue, if you're having energy issues, because these are like the ATP energy cell factories at the cellular level, I think antibiotics can be a contraindication of, when you're having fatigue and energy issues. And so oftentimes, if you don't have energy, then you're not sleeping. If you're not sleeping, you don't have energy, and it just gets you in this, downward spiral.
So this is something where you put that little girl in a rheumatology department at a major hospital. They're going to put her on steroids. They're going to put her potentially on immune suppressing medications. And she's going to have a future where they're mitigating her symptoms and telling her it's just all we can do. This is all we can do for you. There's not a whole lot left we can do for you. But those long-term steroids like that in somebody so young, what is the side effect? It's a very well scientifically documented side effect of steroids that they cause bone loss. Now we have a little girl who's not gaining weight, right? And we're going to put her on a steroid so that she now, not only does she not gain weight, but now we start implementing bone loss before she's even formed her skeleton. So we saved her. We saved her from all of that in her future, because if she would have gone mainstream care, that's what would have happened. She would have been in that situation, because that's the standard of care for that particular condition.
And when my wife, when she was diagnosed, she had some health issues when she was 7 years old. The doctors gave her some medication that caused brain encephalitis, which is basically brain swelling. And during that, she went into a coma for a little while, and her mom was very persistent. And she's like, I'm hearing about this thing. Granted, this is 25, almost 30 years ago now. You know, I'm hearing about this thing called Lyme. Can you test for it? No, I don't think it's that. Well, finally they tested for it and they found out it was. So then they started her on IV antibiotics for a year. Gave her oral antibiotics for another year. And I just look at that, and obviously I'm biased, you know, with her story and just what I see from a client when I work with clients as well too, and their stories. But you know, if that was the solution for her, she wouldn't have had any of these other health issues that happen. You know, having to have SVT, supraventricular tachycardia, where her heart would just take off racing. They clocked it one time in the ambulance at 260 beats a minute. And she was literally just talking with her mom in the kitchen, not doing anything active. Her heart just took off, passed out. Mom called the ambulance took the heart rate, it's 260 beats a minute. And having a couple of heart surgeries, you know, supposed to go to the Junior Olympics for swimming and having to pull out because of health issues. If that was supposedly, you know, the cure, I think she would have got well and stayed well, and that really wasn't the case. It really didn't get to the source.
The list goes on and on and on. Don't take drugs preventatively, which is the most ridiculous thing that's been taking over our medical world by storm. You use a pharmaceutical, you get a surgery when it's necessitated, not because of a potential. So you minimize toxins, and I'm telling you, you're going to be happy.
Autoimmune conditions is just, most of these disease conditions are just a warning. It's just saying, hey, something's out of balance, here's how you can correct it, because they also come with the information of not only what is wrong, but how to fix it. Pain has two messages. It tells us what is wrong, but if we meditate on our pain, it also tells us how to fix it.
Like a lot of viral diseases, Lyme is an infection of opportunity. So it happens to be especially ferocious and potent, but it is also more so when your body is vulnerable. So maintaining optimum health and maintaining the adaptability of your body to respond to infections is really, really key to being able to overcome this infection as well as many others.
There's a number of things I could say about autoimmune diseases, and I think city living is a big part of the problem. We need to turn back to nature. First of all, get grounded, get back on the earth, get back on the sand, get back with the animals, and get that direct connection with the electricity of the earth, because that's one of the things we're losing in cities when we're in shoes and we're in high-rise buildings or we're off the earth as we're separated. We know that autoimmune conditions improve about 10% from when you're grounded. That's amazing. That's good. Okay, we'll take that.
I do, yeah. And so there are excellent protocols on autoimmune disease, removing, cleaning up the diet, city living versus, country living versus city living, and hardly anyone is ever talking about that because it's quite inconvenient. But really, I mean, we're all looking for happiness, and if it's the path to happiness, there's no question that that's where we should be, right?
On that right there, I usually tell people, New Yorkers get this because they know that you always have a place in New York and a place in the country. So that's where you start. Like if you live in a city, start thinking about getting that place in the country. And then eventually, as the years go by, I know what happens. Eventually you start going, I don't think I'm going back to the city. I think I'm going to lease my place in the city. I'm going to stay in the country. And I try to bring people into that pattern.
Through, discussions with Dr. Oob and the information that he's given me and the books that I've read now, it's like you can also reverse autoimmune conditions strictly from the way you eat. In fact, one of the books that I read said that 65% of autoimmune conditions is diet, not genetics. So you can be completely predisposed to, genetically to an autoimmune condition, and it doesn't mean that your genes have to express that condition if you eat right. And that to me was that was my light bulb, bright light moment, is that I was really literally eating myself to death or to a very miserable, environment of autoimmune stuff. The sad reality though is, as a fitness professional, as I've kind of told people about this, I've come to realize that there's a very small segment of society that will take the words and go, I'm gonna do what you did, Steve, and I'm gonna eat right for the next month. 30 days is really all it takes to reverse a lot of these conditions. They just won't do it. Because there's pills they can take, like prednisone or other anti-inflammatory drugs that will help you get rid of the symptoms, but you haven't actually solved any of the underlying problems. But
what proportion of people have you found that will say yes and those that say no?
Out of the people that I've spoken to, probably 70% won't do it, and only about 30% will actually take a proactive approach to eating right. And because the issue is, it's not, you can't just eat right a little. You got to go all in or nothing. And that's because, like, it's not about, removing gluten most of the time. If that ends up being the thing that ruined your small intestine, is the gluten problem, then you can't just eat a little gluten, because the problem's still there. And like Dr. Ebe explained to me, and now that I've read, is like, if your immune system starts to fire off on gluten because it recognizes gluten for some reason as an invading body, it has a long memory. And so you can't just get off gluten for a couple of weeks and go, I'm good. Because even if your gut starts to heal, your gluten sensitivity, your antibodies are there, and your body remembers that. And so you got to go all in. And I know Dr. Amy Meyer's book, Autoimmune Solutions, talks about 30 days. For most people, 30 days is the length of time you have to do a complete elimination of all that stuff to see real, like, life-altering changes in your body, like pain going away. Pain from, like, fibromyalgia, from rheumatoid arthritis, from, all this stuff.
What's your diet now?
Well, I go grain-free, dairy-free, soy-free, corn-free, rice-free, sugar-free.
I think that's it. So she eats a lot of meats and a lot of fruits. We try to get her to eat a lot of
vegetables.
What do you have to do for school every day? Are you able to eat lunch at school?
Well, yeah, I'm not able to eat lunch at school. I always have to bring a packed lunch.
We just have to do a lot of preparation and being prepared for leaving the house, making sure we have food in hot containers or something to heat up, or if we're going to be gone, taking a cooler with us. And I mean, she's had some definitely hard times where after a birthday party or something, I'd look at her and be like, do you need to have a big cry? And she'd be like, yes. And it would kind of come out every month or two that she was struggling, but I haven't seen that in a long time, right? Because what have we talked about parties and stuff? That
it's only about spending time with friends and having memories, and not just the food that you eat.
So we've all kind of had to change, our mindsets. That it's not about, Christmas isn't about, obviously it's about Jesus, but getting together is not about what is everybody bringing to eat. And we just had to have a lot of conversations and about, do you want to go and have the experience and have the memories and the time with friends and all that? Or is the food stuff too hard for you because they're going to be eating pizza and ice cream and cake? And she's always chosen, no, it's okay, I'll take my food and I want to go have time with my friends. But we've had to just change our perspective to be, it's about hanging out with people and not about what we're going to be eating.
So, I mean, it was, simply put, it was dietary avoidance. So we wanted her out of grain, right? Not eating any gluten, not eating any grain. No corn, no rice, no wheat, no barley, no oat, no teff, no millet, no triticale, no quinoa, no pseudograins, no buckwheat, no amaranth. So a lot of people, they think they're going gluten-free and they're following kind of a wheat, barley, rye-free diet, but they're not restrictive enough if they're truly gluten sensitive, because a lot of these proteins in these other grains either look or act just like gluten to people and trigger autoimmune disease. So you've got to get all those things out. So it was a dramatic change in her diet from what she was used to. That grain-free, gluten-free diet change is permanent for her. It's not, we're not going to do that until the symptoms go away and then start reintroducing that food again. We're going to keep it out for the rest of her life. So the biggest challenge for her was the learning curve.
If you have that friend, it's based on them loving and caring for you, not for who they think you are or something that you're just putting forward, like a mask that you're wearing, like, oh, let me just pretend like I'm everyone else, right? But that's not you. So how is that person going to love you if you can't just be you and be like, hey, look, this is me. I can't actually eat that right now. I can't eat these things, and this is what I can eat, and this is me. And you'll find, and you've already found, people that, like, you know, obviously your parents love and care about you, they ain't trying to force you to do something that's not good for your body, and nor would your good friends. They're not all your friends. They're not. Some people are going to be people you can keep close, and some people are going to be people that you know, you can't keep so close, right? Or and those that you can have right by your side because they protect you and they care about you. And if you're going to go eat something bad for you, they say, hey, you shouldn't do that, right? You've got good friends, don't you?
The biggest challenge for her was the learning curve, and just getting through that and figuring out what food she could eat that she also enjoyed, and that her mom could make or cook for her, and how to navigate social situations in school. And, you know, those are where the biggest challenges come for a lot of these types of patients. But I mean, think about it, Jonathan. You've got pain and you've got rashes all over your body. Would you rather change your diet or live with those things, right? And that's the decision that people get to make. Like, that's the great thing about functional medicine. It's their choice, not mine. I just deliver the message, and then they get to figure out whether or not it's worth it for them to be pain-free, to be rash-free, but to change the way they eat. And I like to say, change the way you eat, change the rest of your life.
It was Christmas time, and I found this. And you know, Christmas is supposed to be a time of treats and fun things. And part of the autoimmune protocol is AIP, is what the initials are. It's no chocolate. I'm like, what? It's Christmas, no chocolate? But I was to a point where I didn't care. I didn't care. I just wanted to feel better. And so I did. I dropped everything on I did everything the autoimmune protocol said. So including what I already mentioned, it was also nuts, seeds, chocolate, eggs. And so I took those out and felt significantly better. Now this has been 9 months since I started doing the paleo diet. So 9 months after, and I cut out the AIP, and then those few months, I felt significantly better. I had less inflammation in my hands and my feet. And as I just continued to go, it just got better and better and better.
There are a lot of reasons why a person can develop autoimmune disease, but one of the reasons is because they just eat garbage. You know, they eat food that's bad for them. It tastes good. They get immediate benefit in terms of you know, sugar. Sugar is a very addictive food. You get dopamine release when you eat sugar. But nobody will ever argue that sugar is good for you, unless you're talking about like the sugar industry. They may argue that sugar is good for you. But sugar is bad for you, and we all know that.
So that will help reverse a lot of that. And then eating healthy, lowering your sugar intake, eliminating most processed foods, because that contributes to inflammation, and inflammation can cause many of these types of diseases. So those are a few simple strategies you can do to help you restore your thyroid to its normal function.
Diet perspective, you can look at it a couple different ways. And I don't believe there's one perfect diet for everybody. You know, God gave us different blueprints, and we're understanding this from a science side more and more, just looking at genetics and, you know, carbs and types of fat and protein and the amounts that, you know, each of us can handle and what seems to be the best. But looking at dietary across the board, I think it's good for everybody to, you know, stay away from pork or, you know, pork products, also the bottom dwellers as well too. And I mean, that's biblically referenced as well. That's Leviticus 11:7. And it's all related to toxicity, you know, that these animals don't sweat, they don't really chew their food well, they don't digest well, and if we consume them, you know, we're going to be bombarded with toxins. And even modern science has backed this up and really shown, yep, pigs really, even in a clean environment, still are definitely dirty, you know, toxic animals. And the bottom dwellers, you know, the whole fish and scales thing, which you can, you know, read in Leviticus, but the whole idea of bottom dwellers is that they're the ocean cleaners. So whatever toxins are in the ocean, these, you know, creatures or animals are cleaning that, and then if we consume them, then we're getting that bombardment. So I really believe, you know, staying away from that type of food is important, personally. And then also too, food-wise, so we've got foods that we eat or stay away from, and then we've also got foods, timing, like when we eat.
And we also know that there are specific rules about eating in the Bible, right? And those rules apply to real food, to whole food, to what God provided for us to eat. They don't apply to all this processed, you know, synthetic, chemically, artificially manipulated, pesticide-loaded food that people are eating.
And biblically, I mean, according to the Bible, there's so many references to fasting. Probably the most most well-known one is the 40-day, 40-night fast Jesus did, but fasting, and that's really all about timing. So, okay, let's say you have just use calories for an example. You have 2,000 calories that you consume every day. Instead of, you know, consuming them from 6 a.m. till 8 p.m., we can literally change that window of when you eat. So you're eating the same amount of food, but in a smaller window, and that popularized now is like the intermittent fasting word for that. But what that means is basically, you know, you're eating within maybe a 6 to 8 hour window, and then the other roughly, you know, 16, 18 hours you're not eating, and that's allowing your gut to heal. That's allowing your intestinal tract to heal. And fasting was something my wife was, you know, through her crisis when the bottom fell out, it was something that literally her body was just kind of forced her to do. So there's intermittent fasting. There's also block fasting. That's what my wife really did, is more of like a block fast, like 17 days, water and bone broth. She dropped all her baby weight super fast, and not recommended. It was just, you know, the crisis that she was going through, and that's what she had to do. But block fasting is, you know, where you're taking a few days and you're doing water fasting. You always want to, you know, monitor electrolytes and make sure you get enough electrolytes in with water. But fasting can be really important. And then also the foods.
We need to be empowered, and we need to realize there are things that we could do. And what is that? You need to eat organic as much as possible. You need to eat GMO-free, non-genetically modified foods. You need to, as much as you can, make your own healthcare products and cleaning products specifically. And if you don't have the time, I get it. There are trusted resources that you could find that sell good stuff.
Another topic that's super important in the food diet side is making sure to not consume GMOs, genetically modified organisms. So really eating non-GMO. And there's a lot of controversy. I mean, there's newscasts that are reporting that the Vatican, you know, in Italy, they're okay with GMO, and I'm not okay with this. I mean, you look at Genesis 1:29, and basically God says, I give you every seed. You know, I give you all the seeds. I give you all the seed-bearing plants. And I not in favor of, you know, humans altering and self-creating our own seeds.
She takes a lot of supplements, which have decreased a lot over the year, but we started off with 25 pills a day she had to take. Vitamin and mineral supplementation.
And so for her, it was part of her diet was cleaning that up. For her, part of it was we did some supplementation. She was deficient in vitamin B2 and some other B vitamins that we had to clean up. And, you know, B vitamin deficiencies can cause skin rashes, right? So we wanted to put her on these B vitamins because she was deficient in them, and that was part of her plan. That was part of her protocol. The other part of her protocol was, as the pain subsided, was to get her back to function, was to get her back to gymnastics, was to get her back to activity, and to be able to get her back to being a little girl again, right? You know, I mean, living life again, as opposed to being crippled with pain and crippled with a rash that, you know, other kids are cruel. They look at your rash, they make fun of you. So again, it only took, in her case, it only took 4 or 5 months to really get that down. But it's a lifelong change for her, that diet change.
But she still takes lots of supplements to help with her just vitamin and mineral deficiencies that I can't explain really well, but he explains amazingly, and how they relate to joints and all that, you know, stuff. And then she takes stuff to help with inflammation, like fish oil, different, you know, things like that that help with that. If she ate vegetables a little bit more, maybe we wouldn't have to take as many. But she's working hard at it. So she started off like, you know, a little pill, like, I can't do that, I can't swallow it, you know. And now we were laughing. She's like, oh, those are so small, those are so easy, right? And now she takes them real easily, but only, how many do you take now?
9.
9 a day? Now she only takes 9 a day instead of 25 that she started on. She's taken charge of her health in that respect. She packs all of her pills, does all that. I might have to remind her here and there, but she's taken responsibility for things.
And for any autoimmune disease, you want to make sure that you have adequate vitamin D levels. It's really, because there's a massive epidemic of vitamin D deficiency. So it's really critical that you make sure you have enough. Ideally, the best way is sensible sun exposure. Never get sunburnt. If you can't do that or are unable to, then certainly taking of oral supplement, typically around 8,000 units a day for most adults, but getting to ranges of about 40 to 60 nanograms per milliliter, because you have to test it by blood to figure that out.
I think in autoimmune conditions, for sure, salt deficiency plays a massive role. Now, when I say salt deficiency, I'm not talking about some iodized kiln dried salt. I'm talking about like the real salt that nature prepares for us, which is like sea salt. Sea salt and water, which is what creates hydration, that is very important for autoimmune conditions. It's essential. So I have a sneaking suspicion that what I've noticed about autoimmune conditions in myself for sure shed off immediately as soon as I start drinking salt water. When somebody has similar things to my allergies, like asthma, salt water works. I've seen it over and over and over again. So then I started looking at things like, oh, maybe lupus, maybe it's salt water, or gut problems, right? Where somebody gets an IBS flare-up that it's an autoimmune condition. What do you do there? Maybe they're deficient in salt in their gut, which is what Dr. Norman Walker, the great raw foodist, said all those years ago.
My goal and my purpose is to help people use natural therapies like essential oils to really get down to the basics and do it yourself. Now, I get it. I have 4 children. I'm married. I am busier than I care to admit. We're not going to make every single home and body care product. We're not going to make all of our cleaners. There is balance, yet the purpose is to minimize those chemicals that we know are bad. I mean, there are so many of them. And about focusing on creating products at home that you really can pronounce the ingredients. You know, basic essential oil-based DIY recipes are absolutely key. That you know for sure that you're doing your best. And airborne pathogens. There's so many different things that we need to consider.
The second thing is really focusing on drainage and parasites. So drainage, I believe, is a great word, and I love to distinguish the difference between drainage and detox. So drainage, I think about, it's the normal pathways to clear things out. Detox is really focusing on it's pulling chemicals out of the body. So you're removing, radiation, heavy metals, glyphosate, pesticides, herbicides, like you're literally pulling the chemicals out. That's a detox in my mind. Drainage is really focusing on the pathways. So the colon's a drainage pathway. So if you're constipated, that's a drainage, pathway that's blocked up. The kidneys are drainers. The skin, if you don't sweat. My wife didn't sweat for years. We thought it was such a blessing. She didn't need to use deodorant. Not realizing that's a drainage pathway clogged up and toxicity buildup is gonna, continue to ensue. So you've got lymphatic also as the drainage. The brain draining into the lymph, what they call the glymphatic into the lymph. And then probably the biggest one is the liver bile duct. Some people call, liver gallbladder area. Some people don't have the gallbladder, but, liver bile duct as far as the key. And when you look at the anatomy of the liver processes toxins 2 phases. So phase 1, phase 2, and then there's this thing called phase 3, and it's how does the body or how does the liver get rid of the toxin? And most of those toxins actually end up in the bile. They actually end up getting dumped in the bile. So the liver detoxifies, the liver actually produces bile. The bile is used for 2 things, for excretory mode of, clearing toxins out, but it's also used in digestion. So it'll neutralize stomach acid. It'll also help to emulsify fat. So, you take a bite of, something that's got fat in it, you start eating, the body is going to secrete stomach acid. The food's going to go into the stomach acid, start getting dissolved. The body's then going to release once it gets digested enough, pre-digested enough. It's going to release in the small intestine, and it's the bile that actually neutralizes the stomach acid. Otherwise, the stomach acid will literally just eat holes right in the small intestine. So what happens is through toxicity and even through parasites, this bile duct can get clogged up, can get sludgy. And when it gets sludgy, then we're not getting enough bile to actually neutralize the stomach acid. So then the body says, wait a minute, hey, there's too much stomach acid. I need to decrease it. So it decreases stomach acid, which means then it's a gateway to getting more pathogens into the body. The stomach acid's the first wall of defense essentially against pathogens. So if you get a bacteria, virus, or parasite, stomach acid will work to kill that. So if the stomach acid decreases, then you've got, the gateway where you can let other pathogens in the body. It also decreases how the body can digest. And a lot of that stems just from the fact that the bile is clogged up. And get this, when the bile is clogged up, then that automatically means the lymphatic is clogged, and also the brain glymphatic to lymph is clogged. So for anybody that's getting, brain fog, just not the clarity, They just feel all puffy, swollen like lymph nodes. One of the first things actually to focus on is that liver bile duct, to open that up to get movement, because that'll help the GI as well, but it'll also help drain the lymph and even the lymphatic as well. So drainage is super key, making sure the pathways are moving. You never want to really jump into killing pathogens or necessarily detoxifying chemicals if these drainage pathways are clogged, because that's when you're going to react.
I was still on some of the medication that the first doctor had prescribed me when I was hadn't gone to the holistic doctor yet, and it took me a year and a half to get off that after I started. And once I got off that, because I didn't understand that some of that medication and the medication that I was on was inhibiting my healing, because it was attacking my immune system. And if you're attacking your immune system can't make you feel better. And so I got off that medication in 2 years this month. And then I started to feel significantly better. And it just got better and better and better. And really over this last year, so that was year 3. That was year 3 is when I feel wonderful.
There's actually a lot of great products and things out there, natural, that can really change lives and help people in the parasite category. There's something called Mimosa pudica, and you want to specifically find Mimosa pudica. You want to find that specifically from the seed, because that's actually the fat-soluble portion of it. Seems to work way better. The other portion is not fat-soluble, so it doesn't really get into our cells. And fat-soluble by nature is different than just liposomal. Liposomal is you're encasing in fat for absorption to get into the body, but actually like a fat-soluble Mimosa pudica, that's actually how I got a couple 20-inch roundworms out, was literally Mimosa pudica. That was key. There's other natural things like neem, clove. Clove is pretty well known. There's something, especially Ayurvedic medicine, Vendanga, that works amazing for parasites. Coffee enemas too actually help to purge. So that whole idea of coffee enema definitely can sound a little interesting, and I'm not sure really if it's mentioned necessarily like enemas in the Bible. I know the Dead Sea Scrolls talks about enemas, but coffee enema, when you put coffee up the other end of the body, you put the tube in like 6 inches. There's some veins in our rectum area. It's called the hemorrhoidal veins, or the hemorrhoids people have heard of, and that goes right to the hepatic portal vein. And all you got to know is when you put coffee about 6 inches in to the rectum area, let that absorb, it goes right to the liver. And there's a couple things that happen when you do a coffee enema. It actually increases glutathione, which is a detoxer for the body. But the main thing that I really love coffee enemas for, especially in the drainage phase, and especially when you're working on parasites, is it causes an increased bile production, and it causes a purging. So when that bile gets thick and sludgy and the stuff's not moving, coffee enemas actually help to move that flow or push that out. And parasites love the liver bile duct. They love to clog it up. And bugs in general, you want to think of this across the board, that bugs and pathogens in general love to cause stagnation. Stagnation of the fluids, cardiovascular, the lymph. The lymph is 2 times more fluid than the cardiovascular system, so lymph is huge. The liver bile duct system, they love to clog this up because it gives them an environment that they can thrive in. And when things are moving, that's an environment our body can thrive in, not these bugs. So coffee enemas help to really move that along. There's also really some great products, natural products for drainage as well. Milk thistle, that one is awesome to help open up the liver bile duct system, just to get things open and flowing. Again, you want to think movement is key. Motion is life. Another one is dandelion root. That one helps with bile production. Also helps actually clear the kidneys too, so a couple different drainers. There's something called TUDCA in our body. The fancy name is torso deoxycholic acid, but we'll just know it as TUDCA, T-U-D-C-A. But TUDCA, like our body actually manufactures a little bit of this, but you can get it, extracted from like plants and vegetables and take it, and it's this water-soluble bile acid. And I've seen the most amazing testimonies of people taking this where their liver bile duct is just clogged up. So literally all you do is you take 1 capsule with a meal up to twice a day. So if you have 2 main meals, in a day, or if you have 3 main meals, just pick 2 of them. Whether it's like lunch or dinner, just take a capsule of TUDCA with the meal, and it helps to move the bile duct. I've had people with heart palpitations and pounding and arrhythmias within a month disappeared. Other people, they got so much drainage down the back of their throat they felt like they were going to throw up, and that really relates to the fact that you move the liver bile duct. Now the lymph is being able to clear. Now the lymphatic into the lymph is being able to clear. It's opening the whole pathway up. So TUDCA, I've definitely seen some great things from it. There's an enzyme, DPP Roman numeral 4, or dipeptidyl peptidase 4, it's called. And it's definitely gaining more popularity in the last few years because it helps with gluten and could even help with casein as far as breaking that down. But this enzyme specifically actually helps to squeeze the liver. So it really helps to, again, create movement. And you want to think that motion is life. We want to get movement in there. Carbons and charcoals, clays are really good as well too, to bind on to the bile. And now we're, there's even better things that are available, like a bioactive carbon that actually goes systemic through the body besides just with the liver bile ducts. So that's probably, again, first thing is remove mold. If you have mold, remove yourself from the source. That's definitely very important. And carbon charcoal can be a big helper. You actually want to take that more frequently. So generally, like with carbon or charcoal or like a bioactive carbon, you would take it away from food because it's going to bind anything you eat. So if you take carbon with supplements or you take carbon with food, it's going to bind onto that. So you always want to take it on an empty stomach and then wait, probably at least an hour after you take it with a bunch of water to bind on. And that can be a big helper for those that are suffering with mold. And you want to think not just once a day. Typically you want small amounts of carbon or charcoal multiple times while you have mold exposure to bind on to the bile to clear it out. So that can be a really big tip. So remove yourself from the mold environment. Second thing, protocol-wise, is definitely focus with drainage, making sure these pathways are opened and flowing in the body, and then also address parasites, which is a really big modern epidemic. And then I would say the next step, protocol-wise, is really looking at other pathogens, and especially also addressing the toxicity, heavy metal detoxification. And all these things are so interrelated. Lyme and other pathogens, they can hide inside parasites, which I mentioned, but they also can hide behind biofilm. And biofilm, think of it as, it's like slime or a snot layer. So if you've got all kinds of different pathogens, like you've got the spiral-shaped bacteria, you've got the cyst form, you've got the intracellular form, and you've got other bugs and fungus and viruses in this colony. This colony, oftentimes there'll be a biofilm. It's like a blanket or a layer over top of it. And this blanket basically is a way that it can protect itself from the immune system. In biofilm, when you look at the ingredients, there's a bunch of minerals in it, natural ones like calcium, magnesium, copper, iron, but there's actually a couple heavy metals that can be part of the ingredients of biofilms. And biofilms can be in different locations and different material, but mercury and lead have actually been shown to be ingredients in biofilm. So if somebody has heavy metal toxicity, one of the reasons that can hold them back from getting well of pathogen issues is that there's biofilm protecting, and there's heavy metals that are actually part of this biofilm. So detoxifying can actually help, basically peel the layer, peel that blanket or that layer off to then allow the body immune system to naturally get to it. So looking from a protocol side of things, the first thing is if you are in a moldy environment, you have to remove yourself from that environment. Oftentimes, people can be rather stubborn and I'm just going to get an air filter, or it's really not affecting me that much. And people are affected differently. God gave us different blueprints, that certain people are more affected by mold versus other people. And the idea is if there is mold and it's affecting you, you have to remove the source from your home or from your workplace. And if you can't, relocate or, get into a different environment. And for those that stay sensitive, so they're really reactive, allergic, and just seem to be reactive to everything. Even as you progress through protocols, and it's like, wow, I should be getting better. I shouldn't be this sensitive, and why am I still staying in this? One of the first things that I think about clinically is that there's still mold in the environment, and it creates this like hyperactivity, this hypersensitive state. So the first thing, remove yourself from the source of mold. That's probably, again, first thing is remove mold. If you have mold, remove yourself from the source. That's definitely very important. And carbon charcoal can be a big helper. You actually want to take that more frequently So generally, like with carbon or charcoal or like a bioactive carbon, you would take it away from food because it's going to bind anything you eat. So if you take carbon with supplements or you take carbon with food, it's going to bind onto that. So you always want to take it on an empty stomach and then wait, probably at least an hour after you take it with a bunch of water to bind on. And that can be a big helper for those that are suffering with mold. And you want to think not just once a day. Typically you want small amounts of carbon or charcoal multiple times while you have mold exposure to bind on to the bile to clear it out. So that can be a really big tip. So remove yourself from the mold environment.
We also have to remember that there's the opposite of God, which is the devil. The devil puts challenges and puts roadblocks in our way, and if we can't recognize those challenges or roadblocks, or if we don't have God and our faith to fall back on, sometimes we get drawn down the wrong road. You could equate that to disease.
And I always think of, detoxification is so important. Even biblically, I feel like there's so many references of cleanliness, and not only spirit-wise, but also body, and even like Hebrews 10:22 talks about, really drawing near in faith and, sprinkled clear, especially from evil conscience, but also of our bodies washed with pure water. And I think really from a biblical aspect or side of things, that cleanliness in not being bombarded with toxicity and even, pathogens that create toxins as well too, is such an important piece to getting well. Other factors too that are important: diet and emotions. I really believe relying on God is important in the emotional category. We all have our own emotional stressors, traumas, current, past, but how we react obviously is very individualized as well too, which can make it tough, and really, relying on the guy upstairs, I believe, is super important.
You need to make sure that you stop the toxic thoughts that have a direct connection to inflammation. And how do you do that? Prayer. Meditating on God's word, focusing on the good things of life, positive thinking.
And a big part, what you said, which is, disease wasn't God's intention for us, but it's what happens when we deviate from the path of righteousness, when we deviate away from our faith, and we fall prey to, content in convenience, content in what the devil puts out in our way to roadblock us, to confuse us, to make life more confusing and more complicated. If you really want to boil it down, life can be pretty simple. There's a very good architectural set of rules for ethics and morals, and if you follow them, life is so much more, it's so much more meaningful. It's so much more energetic. It's so much more powerful to live by those things.
The potential for healing that God has created in the human body is beyond what we sometimes can often imagine. Sometimes we're often limited by our own negative perspective on our body's ability to heal. However, with faith in God and trust in the ways He's provided to treat our illnesses, many diseases can be overcome. The real key is to try to stop these diseases before they start. Prevention is always the first step in creating good health and having a wonderful quality of life.
Better at the gym, I'm stronger. It's more exciting for me because I like to be athletic, and not that I am athletic, but I like to be athletic. So it's fun to fulfill some of those desires.
She did swim team after she was diagnosed in December. She started swim team in May last year. And I just remember thinking, she used to be a really good swimmer. And I remember watching her thinking, she's gonna drown out there. And she was so thin and so just weak. And then this year, when swim team started her first meet, her dad and I were watching her swim down, do freestyle, and we were both like tears in our eyes, like, wow, look where she's come. And she's like healthy and normal, and nobody would know it, now that anything was ever wrong with her.
And it was through a lot of prayer, a lot of support, family, that we were really able to make it through. And my wife now today is healthier than she's ever been. And it really took that crisis for us to dig in and to get her to that place.
Thank you for joining me today in exploring Bible health secrets and how we can apply these to our lives. I hope that not only you've walked away with some priceless information of things you can practically do in your life today, but one thing that I'm really excited about, something that I'm thrilled to have brought you today, is the trustworthiness of the scriptures. The Bible is true. It has practical knowledge for what we can do. It has an ability to see through and give wisdom, not to our lives today, in so many areas. It is a reliable source, and it does promise us great and wonderful things. And I just want to come back to the gift that God has given us in this Bible. The Bible does teach us that we have the gift of eternal life through Jesus Christ, and our belief in Him and His death and resurrection. Is my prayer today that as you see the power of the Scriptures, that you've been moved, that you've been touched, that you've seen that God is all-knowing, that He has given the truth in His Bible, and we can trust everything that it teaches us. We can trust the gifts that He's given us, and especially I want to bring to you the gift of eternal life that has been given to us in Jesus. This is the greatest gift that was ever given, and this body will grow frail one day. It will one day cease to function properly no matter what we do. Something called aging, something that is part of living in what the Bible describes as a world of sin. But we've been promised and given the gift of eternal life through Jesus Christ. And it's my prayer that you will accept that today, accept that gift, and give your heart, your life to God. Maybe that's something that you have done in the past, maybe that's something you've never done. But to re-establish your faith in God, if that is something from the past, so you can continue in that relationship, deepen that relationship, and look at things in your life that just like, hey, this is not what God has asked for me to do in my life, this is not His path for my life, and to fully give your life, your heart to God. That is the most valuable thing that you could ever do, so I encourage you to make that decision. If you've seen the power of God in the Scriptures, that you would then make that decision to give your life to God, to give your life to Christ, because He has given all for you.
Don't give up on yourself, just look to the light and you'll see the light. On this journey you'll find different mountains to climb. Just take it and embrace it. Don't get discouraged or fade. It's just a matter of time that you'll see wide open spaces. See, I've been there before, and I know how it feels. When there's darkness all around you, I decided to dream, and it allowed me to heal. And I'm reaching out to tell you.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Thank you.
What a gift. Thanks for being brave enough to just share this.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's definitely very raw.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that's it's beautiful. Your voice is gorgeous.
Oh, that's really sweet of you. Thank you. Thank
Coming
you.
from a family of singers.
Do you?
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, yeah, I want to do Wait. This is actually a song that I wrote for my sister because she was actually going through kind of just a really difficult time in her life, and it made me realize that everything we do in life is just more so waiting for that moment to be able to bring us joy and bring us happiness. So this song is called Wait. Let me think of how it goes. I am falling down. I've learned my lesson now. 'Cause I never thought gravity would bring me to the ground. I went from crawling to walking to running too fast, on a mission to go the distance. I fell in love with you too fast. This is how it's gonna be. Yeah, if you say that you're not ready now, I guess I'll just wait. love song, but I think in general you can just kind of take it into any circumstance really, and just know that in life sometimes you just have to wait for the answer, you know? Just hold it out.
That's cool. 'Cause that's a message of hope.
Yeah.
Because if you're willing to wait,
Mm-hmm.
you can maintain hope.
Oh yeah.
If you're impatient.
Yeah.
You can lose
Patience.
hope.
Yeah, that's the virtue.
Yeah.
To
Patience, prudence, and charity. The 3 virtues that come up in the book Pilgrim's Progress.
Yeah.
The three women that are represented. But, you got another verse for us on that one?
Okay, yeah, let's keep going. I actually started a little high, so
Yeah.
Who will dry my tears? Who will remind me not to play with fire? I just had to learn from the years of trial and error until I get it together. I went from crawling to walking to running too fast. On a mission to go the distance, I fell in love with you too fast. This is how it's gonna be. If you say that you're not ready now, I guess I'll just wait.
No, I love that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just hearing this message. It sounds like, yeah, it's got the love song element, but it sounds also like a prayer to God. Just, God, if you're not ready to heal me now, not that God is never unwilling to heal, not that God causes pain and suffering, not that any of these things, but if you say that you're not ready, if there's some reason for if whatever the case, God, I'll wait.
I'll wait it out.
For you.
Yeah, and I definitely, when I was writing the song, I went in, thinking of my sister's story, and it was her love story and everything, but it was a moment of me being able to realize like how important waiting and being patient and just not giving up is, because sometimes you're not going to get the answers immediately, and you are going to have to go through that search and that trial and error, lesson to learn, but it will absolutely teach you what you need to know, and it'll work out in the end.
I just want to let you know, if you've enjoyed this series, if it's brought you peace, if it's brought you happiness, if it's just instilled hope in your life, that I hope that you'll take this resource with you so you can continue to rewatch it and explore the elements of the episodes that you want to rewatch, and read through the transcripts as you can get that if you make the decision to own this series. And owning the series allows you to support our mission, which helps us to keep going in the world, getting information, truth to the world to help bless and to save lives, and just to be an amazing witness. So your help helps us to continue that mission, that message, and also it allows us to continue to give back to charities for people that can't help themselves, people that are undergoing tremendous suffering around the world, and you can learn more about that. But when you own this series, you're able to delve into the extended interviews of all of the experts and learn directly from their wisdom, their hard-won wisdom, things that were not shown in the series because we could only fit into episodes. So you could see like 90% of the content inside of that section of the full extended interviews, and check out your favorite speakers and delve in, read along with the transcript so you can see exactly what's happening there. We've got the guidebook and notes and scriptural references guide, and that allows you to really track along and see that step-by-step process so you can work on identifying the areas in your own life that need help, and also how to commit certain areas of your life to prayer. And we've got all these resources set up for you to go through step by step so you don't feel lost, so you don't feel overwhelmed, so you don't feel confused. That's what this is for. So during the free screening of this Bible Health Secrets series, we've got a really special price for you during this limited time window. So now's the time to make that choice, to grab it and to take it with you and share it with your loved ones, your friends and your family. So you can do that by just clicking the link below. Okay, so I'm not far from Orlando, Florida, about an hour and a half away. We just got in from a late night flight and I'm in Ocala. Right now I'm at a school called the Trinity Catholic High School, which is just behind me here. It's being used right now as a base for a group called the Amen Clinic. The Amen Clinic have set this thing up and they've decked it out. They're helping people in a number of areas, and we're going to kind of explore that in a moment. And in here we have a whole bunch of people. Some of these people have been in line all night, literally from the evening last night all through the morning, sleeping on the street so they can get help and treatment for things that they either haven't been able to afford or haven't been able to get the care for. So let's go check it out, see what's going on, talk to some of these people, see what they're coming here for, and make that connection. So let's go check it out. So I got my buddy here, Shion.
Hey, John.
Cool. So this is the guy that helped make it happen, Shion Shiranishi. And you're gonna tell us what's going on here, buddy.
Yeah, so basically we're having an Amen clinic here, and we're providing free dental, free vision, and free medical for the community in Ocala. This is basically the beginning. This is where everyone's coming in to line up to get each different kind of treatments.
What did you come to say to this lady here?
Well, my mom said to say thank you because she's had a great time, and she couldn't get that done because it would get her molar removed. It would have cost $1,000 to get it removed. She just got it done for free. She's so grateful. She's just like thank you right now because she can't talk right now because she has to put pressure on it and she's not feeling good. So she just went to the car and she's getting ready to leave.
Oh, that's cool. And so, was she in pain?
Yeah, she was in a lot of pain before she did before she got the
operation removed. Yeah. So, how would she show that she was in pain?
She would show that grabbing her mouth, like she has to sleep to not let the pain get to her, because she takes naps, so the pain doesn't hurt her, because she can't feel anything when she's sleeping.
My wife is Christian.
Christian?
I have no problem with that at all.
Yeah. Okay, so you come from a Muslim background, your wife... Yeah, okay, this is your doctor?
This is my wonderful doctor. He's here to help people like me. That's why I appreciate it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Just giving back a little bit, right? To the community that gives up so much. Yeah. The least we could do. Everyone's here because of love.
I'm talking from the bottom of my heart, brother. Watch me.
That's so beautiful, man. That's so touching. You know, you're bringing tears to my eyes.
I want to sleep here. I feel like home. Yeah. Bring me some pillow.
Yeah. You feel like you're a brother, right?
Yeah.
Most people are getting 1 or 2 teeth done, and they're going to make you change your smile.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so awesome. I don't even know what to say. Like, it's crazy. I did not think this was gonna happen. You know?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, I'm happy for you, man.
I'm happy I found you.
Well, I mean, thank the Lord, man, but yeah, I mean, and praise God that we were able to make that connection. And
thank you very much, Freedom Clinic, and God bless all of you.
What was making you take it?
That's what I'm trying to really figure out. You know, like they tell us it's a disease. You know, that we have a disease. Mm-hmm. And it's more like an allergy, you know. Once you get it, once you start doing it, it's hard to stop, you know. It's just that craving you get, you know. If I had $5 and I hadn't eaten in 3 days, and I get $5, I'm going to get another hit before I'm going to go get a cheeseburger, you know. It was that bad, and you know, you just can't control it. Like I never wanted to be like that, you know. I never thought as a kid growing up, like, oh, I want to grow up and be a crackhead, you know. Like, I never thought that, you know. I had a real spiritual like encounter, you know, like experience, and felt like God was talking to me, you know, through another person.
Really?
And yeah, it diverted me. I was on my way to go rob a drug dealer, and
which is really dangerous.
Yeah, I could have got shot. I could have, you know, I could have hurt him. I could have went to prison. You know, never know what could have happened.
You're on your way, so you...
I was riding my bike across town, to go, because he wouldn't front me nothing, you know, so I was like, I'm gonna go take it, you know.
And you had a weapon on you?
Yeah, I had a knife on me, and there happened to be a guy in the bushes, back in the woods, and there was 2 chairs there, and so I'm riding my bike, and he's like, hey, come here. So I turned around, went back up in there, and I had never seen this guy before, so we just started talking. And we talked for like 45 minutes before I even got his name. And then, you know, he's like, man, me and you, man, we could be best friends, you know, look at this and that. And I was like, man, this guy's crazy, you know. But he was just real friendly, you know. And so we just talked for about 2 hours. We sat back there in the woods, you know, in these 2 chairs, just sitting there talking. And I told him what I was about to go do and stuff, and he was like, why, man, why would you do that? You know, you seem like a good dude and everything. And he's like, why wouldn't you just go ask somebody for something, you know, this and that? And I was like, well, I don't want to be begging, you know, I'm a beggar. I ain't trying to beg nobody for nothing. And that's when he told me, he said, you know what the definition of begging is? And I was like, no, you know. And he said, the definition of begging is honestly asking somebody for something. And I totally thought it meant something different, you know. So when I heard that, it made me really think, you know. I was like, man, like, honestly asking somebody for something. Like, so I said, you know what, I'm gonna go honestly ask somebody for help. And 2 days before that, I had met this guy that was in AA and NA at a Wendy's. And he asked, he came up to me and told me, you know, if I want to change my life, to get his number and give him a call. 2 days later, that thing happened with the guy in the bushes, and that same night I called him up and asked him if he could get me into a detox, and he came and picked me up and brought me to the centers and detox, and then I got into the Addie Ross program there. It's like a 3 to 6 month program. I've been there 3 months now. So, wow. Yeah, it's totally changed my life.
Really?
Yeah.
And have you been going with the drug addiction?
I don't have no more cravings.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I just pray. I pray every day when I wake up in the morning. I thank God for getting me through another day. At night, you know, and then if I'm going through something, I'll say a prayer to help him, you know, ask him to help me get me through what I'm going through, you know. And, you know, when I first got there, I didn't really know, you know, like I didn't really know how to pray. I wasn't sure if I was doing it right. I didn't know how to, you know, like, and so I started asking questions, you know, like finding people that were already praying and into the God and stuff, you know, and I was like, well, how do you actually know if you're saved, you know? Like, yeah, I've asked for forgiveness, I feel like I've given up to him, but how do you know if you've really actually done it the right way or something, you know? Like, and they're like, man, you'll know, like, you know, all you gotta do is ask. And like I realize now, like, God doesn't judge me for who I am or what I've done, you know? Like, he knows we're not perfect and we're gonna make mistakes, you know? And he expects that from us. But it's just learning from those mistakes and just trying to live a better life, you know. Like, I don't want to go back to hurting people and stealing and, you know, just doing the bad things I was doing, you know. Not honoring my parents, you know, and I lost, you know, all contact with all my parents and stuff, and now I'm finally starting to get that back, like communicating with them, telling them I love them and stuff, you know. It's awesome.
Wow.
So, yeah.
What's that feel like for you, man?
It's awesome. It's amazing, you know. Gotten a second chance at life, you know.
This is Gail, and she's our optometrist. She's part of
our Nice to meet you, Gail.
Nice to meet you.
So she's the person that runs the whole vision department.
Cool.
That's it, yeah.
What's your vision with what you're doing with people here?
Well, what we're doing is a couple of things. We're satisfying that need of being able to see.
Usually they can get an exam, but the cost of glasses is too expensive. So we were blessed to have a company donate frames, brand new frames, not used, not secondhand, and brand names. There are actually some designer names over there that they can choose from. So anybody that comes in can get glasses, and that's one of the self-esteem things that we hope to implant to them. Then with those glasses, of course, we help them to read and study the gospel for themselves, so we encourage that. We put glow tracks in the glasses when they pick them up. But in addition to that...
And what's a glow track?
Glow track is just an evangelistic track. It just gives a little bit of light to the gospel, so they can read it on that kind of term.
Cool.
So that's included in the glasses. So the patients come for the glasses. We come to give them the glasses and the care. So we give them a routine exam to make sure they don't have glaucoma, cataracts, diabetes, changes. We do all of that, but they're just coming for glasses, but we're giving them that and more.
Dr. Daniels, I'm interested in knowing where you're seeing a correlation between eyesight and lifestyle choices. Is there a correlation between these things?
Most definitely. Your eyes are the window to your soul. You've heard that, right? Okay, so with diabetes, definitely with diabetes. Sometimes patients are identified as diabetics with the eye care doctor first. They come in with blurred vision and they just assume glasses would make it better, and it's not the glasses, it's their blood sugar off the roof. And so we usually identify and have identified diabetics for the first time just through a routine eye exam. So that's the importance of that. Then once it's identified, you have to check that retina, make sure there's not any diabetic bleeding or changes in the back. And that's something else we're praying for, is grants to get a camera that's portable enough to come to these clinics with us, so that every diabetic patient gets a visual camera, imaging, to make sure there's no diabetic bleeding.
Right. How much does that cost for that camera?
It's about $10,000.
Okay. And then how many clinics do you have running, and so how many of those cameras would you need?
We just need 3. Believe it or not, we put them in the trucks with us with Amen, and they'll go to every trip we go to.
Really?
So it's that portable.
So those 3 cameras for $10,000 a piece, what kind of difference do you think that would make? How many lives would that impact, and what impact would that have on those lives?
Interesting. I just read an article. So if we catch it early and detect it early, diabetic changes cost healthcare system maybe $800. If we catch it and there's already diabetic bleeding and changes in the back, you just increase it to $12,000. Okay, and if you don't catch it and treat it at all, the patient will go blind, because it's the #1 cause of blindness.
And Sally, were you noticing that you were in need of some new glasses?
Yeah, I didn't want to admit to it, you know how it goes. But yeah, I was having, because I do a lot of driving, and I do a lot of night driving because my husband has lost vision in one of his eyes. So I have to do 90% of the driving, especially at night. And I'm finding when I'm reading, I'm like, everything start getting blurry. So I run to the dollar store and I get these dollar glasses. So I have like $10 glasses running all over the house, and it's really annoying. You know, so.
And they're not really good for your eyes, the dollar glasses?
I don't. It's okay, but I think that I need to get something more professional. So that I needed to get my eyes checked, because it's been more than 5 years since I've had my eyes checked. Now that we're retired, we do a lot more reading. But we also do a lot of computer work too.
No, that's amazing. And I know that if you can read, then you can do the things that you love.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely,
And then some people, I know that with this clinic, they're enjoying encouraging people to, with their eyesight, if they want to read the Bible and things like that.
Yes.
Is that something that's interesting to you?
Yes, because I had to change to get bigger letters on my Bible. Because they were getting smaller, and then I used one. Sometimes I use it on my phone. So the phone has a Bible, and it has the letters that can get a little bigger. So that's what I've been using.
But with the glasses, it'll be better again.
It'll be much better. It'll be much better.
Well, we were originally here for dental, and it was so overbooked we couldn't do it. So we just the 2 ladies here did
Vision. Okay, cool. This needs more funding, doesn't it? That's what I'm here for.
Okay.
To organize, to like appeal for more funding.
Oh, okay.
So what would be your message to somebody that was considering like donating to something like this? Why do you think it's valuable?
I think it's valuable because there's so many people that need help. I just think there's so many people that don't have insurance. I'm one. I had insurance on my job, and they cut it out. So I'm without insurance. I'm looking, but it's so expensive. Very expensive. So I just kind of took advantage of a free thing which is, I think is great. I think they need to do it more often than just, from what I've heard, once a year.
Yeah.
So it needs to be done at least three times a year.
Yeah.
But I know it's the funding, like you said, it's the funding.
Yeah.
So, and I think if more people would donate to a cause like this, it would be a great help to the community. I really do.
Yes, I've been going through some trials and tribulations, emotionally and financially, and I needed to move this mountain. I'm still halfway there, and when the preacher said about climbing this mountain, I felt like he was talking to me. I really did. I felt touched. I felt like God was in my heart. I really did. I really feel like he's here for me right now. I do.